add something on your question, Jamel, I think we have been seeing a major question of political philosophy being debated in this country, and it's sort of a question of, do I care the most about individual freedom, freedom as defined as freedom from intrusion and governance, particularly by the government, or do I find, or is my animating principle for public life a more collective view, a view that we all do better when we all do better, and that in fact if we have the means to create better outcomes and opportunities for people, we should all support them and sacrifice a little, each one of us, for a better outcome for the public. And I think the very idea of the public has actually been really fraught, and it gets more fraught. I mean, this is sort of basic social science, that it gets more fraught when the community that is being represented in whatever electoral body becomes more diverse. It becomes harder. We are an amazingly huge country, geographically, over 300 million people. We are the most diverse nation of our size on Earth, and we are, in fact, a really beautiful experiment in a multiracial democracy, and no other country has taken that on to the extent that we have. And so I think when you look at sort of the willingness to do big investments in mobility, like the GI Bill, or the incredible expansion of home ownership that happened in the 1950s to create what was the first, sort of resoundingly middle class in the nation, there were racial aspects to that kept certain people out of that social contract. And as there were sort of more signatories to that contract in the 1960s and 1970s and 1980s, I think we haven't been deliberate enough about having the conversation that we need to have in order to make sure that racial anxieties, which are natural to have and that everyone has unconsciously, of actually all races and backgrounds, that doesn't stop our desire to do the kinds of investments and shared sacrifices that'll ensure that our nation's future is as bright as our past. And so I think that young people particularly, there was a report from the Center for American Progress, oh gosh, like 5 years ago maybe now, called The Progressive Generation, that looked at existing polling data. It wasn't the new poll that we have, but existing polling data about their attitudes, their public attitudes. And young people are actually more oriented towards public solutions, more willing to pay higher taxes for higher services, degrees of service from the government than any generation since the Depression generation. And I think a lot of that has to do with the period of time when we've grown up in, where we've really gotten the message from certain sectors of our political sphere that you're on your own, and that you're on your own for credit cards. There's not going to be any regulation of that. You're on your own for higher ed. You're on your own for childcare, all these things. And that, in fact, there's a backlash from young people and saying, you know what, actually, we'd like to have a society where people took care of each other a little more and leveled the playing field of opportunity.